All right, what's going on, guys? Rick Designs here, and I figured I'd kind of upload a different type of tutorial. This isn't the normal kind of tutorial that I do for more of the newer game engines like Unreal Engine and things like that, but it is in the similar vein. Basically, what I'm going to be showing you is how to create a custom asset or model for the game Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition. Now, the new Enhanced Edition of Neverwinter Nights allows you to use more of a modern kind of texture system for like normal maps and specular maps. If you wanted to add ambient occlusion, what I would advise is that you bake that into the diffuse. But what I'm going to show you, I'll explain how you can do this without having to worry about other steps when creating the ambient occlusion, meaning that you kind of want to make the normal and the specular map off of a normal diffuse texture before you create a diffuse texture with the normal map information baked in. There's a reason for that, but let me basically go over what these tools are here. Right here, this is Vel Tools, VEL Tools. This is a plugin that you want to download. And this plugin here is NWMax Plus. So you want to make sure you get this version here. I will be posting the links to both in the description as soon as I can find them again. Once I know that they're the correct ones, I will put them in the description. And what I'm going to explain to you is basically the process of how to create it the best I can. So I already have this set up. And from what I can gather, the unit scale in Neverwinter Nights is meters. A few people have said that. Some people have said centimeters, but it seems like meters works the best. Now, let's say you've created this box and you scaled it properly and you want to make a base for it. This is the AuroraBase is what they call it. And this is what will tell the Aurora Tool Set where your model is sitting, as well as this little arrow here and what direction it's facing. Okay, now I'll go through all this in a second, but basically what you want to do first after, say, creating this, so let's say I took all of this off, but we just made this, right? So before we do all that, you want to make sure that when this is selected after you've created it, my obvious advice would be that if you're going to create something, you want to make sure that you have a layer stack. Now I've already collapsed this and stuff, but usually you'll have one that says box, then you want to add a filter that says edit poly, and then you want to add the unwrap UVW. Okay, then you want to collapse all that after you're done making this. Once you're finalized with this, that's when you would do that. But my advice would be, save one version with nothing collapsed, then save another version of the 3ds Max file with everything collapsed. This way, if you make any mistakes, you can go back. So let's say we're done with this. We've already applied a texture. Now this texture here is just basically a stone wall. And I, kind of cheated. I used a quick export out of Quixel Mixer real quick because I just wanted to get a seamless texture fast. Normally you wouldn't do this. You can't really do this without a certain type of license. So I do not, advise people doing this unless you get permission. But again, if you just make your own kind of like a texture sheet or something, like say in ZBrush, and you make a seamless version, you can do that. You can make your own, and basically same thing. So with that program, I was able to export a specular as well as a normal map on top of the diffuse or albedo texture. And this is what you're going to need to get the full rendering out of the new system. So basically what they did recently is they came out with a new lighting system. This is one of their major updates. I'm not going to get into a whole thing about how they've promised a lot of things since launch. I know a lot of people feel a certain way about that, but they're finally, at least fulfilling some of their promises. So they got a new lighting system, and they have the ability now to use materials with normal and specular maps, which the old game did not allow you to do. So that's pretty cool. So basically here it is. You create this model, right? And now let's say I want to create the base for it. So what you need to do is you go over here and then you go here. Now, if these plugins are installed properly, you might have to look into that yourself on how to do it. But basically it's, it's about adding it to the plugins folder. And again, you'll look in the folders, you'll see certain ones that will reference the source folders of, like, say 3ds Max. You know what I mean? You'll download these plugins, they'll have a certain folder. You go into your 3ds Max, you'll see that same folder. It just means put those files in that folder, if that makes sense, right? So anyway, I have this all set up, and I might do another tutorial how to set that up if people are interested. So I set it all up, and you come over here. Now normally it's on standard, right? But if you've install this properly, come over to this little symbol here under this tab, come all the way down to Neverwinter Nights, and you want to select AuroraBase. Now this is for placeables. Now all this other stuff here I haven't messed with, so I'm still kind of trying to figure that out. So as I figure those out and make them work, I will make more tutorials. So right now, basically what you want to do is click on that. And then after you click on that, you're going to click on the base here. Okay. So let me see if I can delete these without, nah. Okay. Yes, I can. Okay. I can do it. All right. So I click on AuroraBase, right? And this is what you would do. And so this is going to pop up and it's going to ask you the model type. And what you want to make sure, if it's a placeable, is you click other. You do want to make sure you center it to the grid because this is already centered. I'm going to say yes. But you also want to make sure that this AuroraBase is basically named after your object, because it's going to attach itself once you place it, meaning that if you move around this base with the arrow, it's going to move around your 3D model. So we'll just do that. That's already set. Boom, done, right? Okay, so now that it's centered, watch what I do when I select this. Oh, hold on. Watch what happens when I select this base. Now, obviously, it's going to make this up here. Don't worry about this. I did this for another tutorial, but basically, what you do here is this. You want to make sure that you bring it up here and that it goes right underneath this like this does. You don't want it to go into a triple drop, right? And that might happen. Nope. Okay, I got it good. So again, AuroraBase is named the same as this, right? So what's going to happen now is when I select this, this moves with it, and that's a sign that it's working. So now that that's done, you've basically created the base and you've created the model. And again, when you do the, UV unwrapping and stuff like that, with the new 3ds Maxes, they start with like a physical based renderer in Arnold. I had to switch this to basically be standard because I'm used to the old school way of doing it. And since it's an older game still, you kind of want to probably go in that direction. This way you don't get like a lot of gloss on your model and you don't want it to look weird. So basically what you do is you click on this, right? And then you'd want to add a diffuse texture like so. So what I'm going to do is, go to bitmap, and if you've set this up properly, what's going to happen is that you'll have a general tab. And again, because it's referencing the old standard legacy way of doing stuff, this would be for, for instance, just the texture, the diffuse texture. So let's say that I pick this and I put in, the brick texture onto it. Okay, great. Now, if I wanted to do a normal map to kind of see how that's going to look in this, in 3ds Max, you would basically go back, say, hold on, cancel this out. I've already done it. You'd go back here, you'd go under maps, and you would select bump 100 and then do this, right? And so when this pops up, that's because what I did before this step was, instead of picking bitmap, you go all the way down to pick bump map. Then this will open up, then you click on this, then you pick bitmap like you normally would with the texture, if that makes sense. And then it will basically fill this in, and it will give you another drop down for the normal map. So this way you can scale it and make it, match up with the original if you have to. Now, a note that you want to keep in mind is that Neverwinter Nights will not be able to save the data of where your tiling texture is, meaning that if you change it from like 1 to 1 and it's like, let's say I click on this now, right? Right here, tiling, this is the default. If you switch this around and then export it, Neverwinter Nights is not going to be able to remember that. Another thing I would advise is make sure it's not blurry. So what you have to do is, depending on the model, is you have to lay out the UVs, and you need to then, once you do that, you need to bake out another texture that's going to basically reference where your UVs are laid out. And that's what you're going to use to make your normal map and your specular map. Now, I use Crazy Bump really quickly to do that. I probably wouldn't advise that because it's not going to look as good, but they also export the textures in JPEG, which means you have to bring them into Photoshop anyways, and then you got to save them out as Targa. It will only accept Targa files in the hack pack or the overrides. That's the only thing that the engine's going to understand. So you want to make sure that you export those. Now, I do 16-bit, but let's say you're doing a model that has like a fence and you have a see-through kind of fence. you would want to do 32 and make sure your alpha mask is included in it. It's sort of like the old Unreal Engine texture methods, where if you wanted a fence, but it was just a straight wall with collision, you wanted to make it look like a metal fence or a wooden fence, but not actually make the 3D model, you would have to do the same thing. You would have to, bring in a target file, 32-bit, and reference an alpha file. Okay, now I think I have a tutorial on my channel somewhere about that. If not, I'll make one. But basically, that's how you would do it in this engine as well, because these are basically around the same time. The old Aurora Tool Set Neverwinter Nights game came out around the time, Unreal Tournament 99 came out. Then you had 2004, right? So that's around that time when they did things like that. So anyway, you basically make sure this is just so that you can see how this looks here. Now, when you export that, it's not going to remember where that normal map is, unless you make the normal map exactly the way it's laid out on your UV map or your diffuse texture. Meaning that what I would probably do is take the diffuse texture, all right, just bring that out alone, and then just make a normal map from that texture, okay? And if you want to do like a ambient occlusion map, you can do the same thing. But again, you want to make sure that whatever bake you have for ambient occlusion, it's done on the diffuse map, and then you export it with it, because there is no option to bring in ambient occlusion separately as a texture in Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition. So think of it this way. We have like a floor here, right? And if we did ambient occlusion, you would probably see a little bit darker here, and then it would kind of lighten up as it got to about here, because the bounce light's going to be doing that around, like ambient light. So you would want to create a normal map and specular map just from the original diffuse, okay? Name it the same thing as your placeable. Set it up in the MTR file, which I'll show you in a second. And then what you want to do after you've made the normal map and specular, then you can make an ambient occlusion bake on top of this, then just replace the normal diffuse map, okay? And this way, what will happen is the detail of the texture will have the ambient occlusion shadowing on it, but the normal map and specular won't know about the shadowing, because if you do it when you have shadowing on it, it's going to affect those two, and it's not going to look right. So, all right, let's say that we've already, set this up. We're going to export it. So basically what you want to do under NWMax Plus is you come under here, okay? And you want to make sure that all of these are selected, right? You also want to make sure that if you've already exported this somewhere and you're going to do it again, you're going to have to move those. Otherwise, it won't export this properly. Notice how it says exported one models. I've already done this. Let's say that I try to do this again, even though you figure it might overwrite those files, it's not going to do it. It will just say exported 0 models, and it won't do the process that it needs to do. So you're going to have to move those and export this into a clean folder or clean space where they don't have these files yet, okay? That's just something that might pop up. You'll notice that making this and exporting them. Let's say once you do that, another thing you want to do, I'll show you in a second, is that there's sanity checks. Now, I'm not totally sure what that all means. Sometimes that's important, sometimes it doesn't matter. I uncheck those, because if for some reason there's an error, it won't export the model, because it will say there's errors in the sanity check. Now, that could be something to do with collision. I do notice that when I brought this into the game engine, it had no collision. So that could be something like that. Now, I'll get into that once I learn more about it, but I figured I'd show you what I learned so far. So let's say those are not checked. So if I go here, I believe it's here, or maybe it's over here. I know there's somewhere where you can uncheck sanity checks. That's kind of odd, because I know I remember doing this at some point here. And you'd be able to tell that it clearly had yeah, odd. Once I figure this out, I'll probably just make a updated video to kind of show you how to do that quick. But there is an option to uncheck sanity checks, so you don't have that issue when you're exporting it. It might be under I really kind of want to show you guys this, figure out where it is, but for the sake of this tutorial, we're not going to do that right now. So anyway, like I said, once you create the base, you create the model, you have the textures on there. You want to make sure the hierarchy is like this. Like I said, don't worry about this. Let's just delete that to get that out of the way. That's a little odd. Delete one, you got to do all three. All right, so basically this is all set. You go like this, and then under general utilities, export all selected, and you want to make sure that you have this set up where you know that's going to be exported in a certain area. Now that where I was able to change this is exactly the menu that I wanted to show everybody on how to get this done. Kind of stinks because it's pretty important. Odd, because I was pretty sure that it popped up in these areas. Again, like I said, I'll make a supplement video to kind of show you how to do that. But basically, once that's set up and you have a place where you're gonna actually export this, you'll select this. This will export it to, like, say, your desktop. And then once that's done, what you're gonna have to do, as I'll show you in a second here, is you're gonna have to make sure, for instance, that and I'll show you those in a second, you have, like, say, put it in a folder that you can easily get to and you know what it is. I'd name it after all the files here. So for instance, I've already done this. So this here is an MTR file, and this is the new type of file type that you add to your hack pack with your model and textures. So it will reference the new textures you've made. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So basically, this is the setup. So if you want to make one for yourself, you could easily do this. You can name it whatever your placeable is. You do have to put PLC and then underscore and then whatever your name is. But make sure it's not too long. You may not notice it at first. It might let you save it that way. But when you bring it into the hack pack utility, you're going to see part of it cut off. And it needs to know if it's a normal map or specular map. So I would say keep it within this many characters. You know what I mean? This way you can make sure that it's within the proper character amount, so it's not going to cut it off. So this is what you set up. This will be the diffuse texture, texture 0. And this says right here, used for normal and specular mapping shaders. And then these two will reference those two. So again, if you take a look, I have them right here. Okay, so this is what you would be adding into a hack pack, and I'll show you in a second. So this is the model file. All right, I know it shows a notepad symbol, but it's because I've opened it up with that and it just automatically turned to default. So you'll have this exported out of 3ds Max with Neverwinter Max Plus. You'll be able to go through all this, see all this information. But the part that's not going to be part of your model yet, until you add it yourself, is going to be this right here. Okay. So what will normally happen is that you'll see this and then instantly this is after it. You need to add these things, otherwise it's not going to work. So don't worry about the null after texture 1 and 2. For some reason, you just got to put that there. And then render hint, normal and spec mapped. Then material name. Obviously, I made the material the same name as a placeable. Same thing, whatever. Shininess 1. Now, I'm sure you could probably change that. I haven't messed with it yet, but, you know, for the sake of the default, I would probably leave it there. And again, making sure it's, you know, lined up. Looks neat. And then save your .mdl file again. Nothing will change in the file. It won't mess with your model. All this is doing is adding the extra info it needs to reference this file to then reference these. Okay, if that makes sense. So once that's done, what you want to do is you want to open up the NWHack utility within Neverwinter Nights game folder. Okay, now this is something that you can find in the program folder, and like say if you have the Steam version, go in there, you know, Steam apps, common, blah blah blah, go to Neverwinter Nights. If it's not in there, go under your documents and look for Neverwinter Nights, and then you'll see a few folders in there. Usually it's in the utility folder or the UTL folder. I think they kind of abbreviate it in the documents. So once that's done, let's say you're creating a new hack pack, right? But I'll open up one that I've already got going. Now, these are just normal placeables. I don't have like all the extra textures for these. I do have them referenced, but I just I have this hack pack from a while ago. The problem is, for some reason, it's not working with the files that are already in here. So I'll probably have to make new ones. And it could be due to the fact that the new updates kind of change things. So I remember setting up the MTR file differently as well as the MDL file. So since it's new, they got the new update, I'll have to change these. So don't worry about those, but it's the same principle. Basically, here's the player scale. This is the model. This is the one I just exported out of 3ds Max that I showed you. This is the MTR file that I showed you. Same thing with the model file with the updated information. And here's the diffuse, here's the normal map, and the specular. And that's what you would do. And if you have to add them to this, you go to add resource, then you go to the folder or whatever this is, bring them in. I would make sure that you don't overwrite anything. I would delete them first and just bring them in fresh and clean, because you never know what can happen. Sometimes there's issues where it just doesn't update. It's a good sign to be able to look at the size in bytes, but if that doesn't change for some reason, it might just mean that it didn't overwrite it properly. So again, I would just remove these. Or you can export all these, back them up, put them in a backup folder, then remove them, then bring in the new ones. That might actually be a better way of doing things, but just to make sure you don't lose any of your files. So once you've done this, MTR, model, 3 textures, and you bring this in through a hack pack, okay? So I just call this drakenitems.hack. You would go into the Aurora Tool Set. You would go under modular properties, custom content, add in that hack pack, save the module, load everything in. Then you would essentially go in, create the placeable yourself. I'll show you that in a second. I'm just going to show you how this works in the game engine first, and then I'll go into the tool set. But basically, I'll show you how to create this in the tool set so you can actually get the placeable working. The textures will pop up. And due to the new lighting system, now you'll actually be able to see in the tool set how the specular and normal map actually is going to work before you go into the game engine. But I'll show you for the sake of the tutorial how it's going to look in the game engine. So let me resume here. Okay, so basically, as you can see, here's the placeable. Doesn't look the greatest, but you can see over in the corner here, the light is bouncing off the normal map and the specularity, okay? And if I were to turn this guy around, it's affecting it. So let me kind of move here. All right, see how it's kind of moving where the light source is. So it is actually doing its thing. And again, this is what you can achieve with what I just showed you. Now you can also see that I have modeled this off of the human character in the game. My advice would be to probably model everything off of the biggest character model that you can actually play by default, which is the orc. But just for the sake of the tutorial, I did it off the human model. And I mean, you can even make a different player scale for every type of character. You know what I mean? So if you want to test and keep going back and forth with the game engine, and make sure that, say, this is the size of a gnome or a dwarf and stuff like that, you can do that. So with this whole process I'm showing you, if something isn't scaled right, just keep doing it until it matches like the size of the character, and then save those into a default template on 3ds Max. You know what I mean? Like I had already. Save that. And once you have that saved, you have the unit scale the same and everything like that, it should always be the same when you work within that project file. So that way you don't have to remember this every time, rescale it, all that stuff. But essentially, that's it. Now for collision, obviously can't do this really, right? You would have to set collision up properly. And I believe that might be what Sanity Checks is. There might be another way to actually create a collision all around your placeables. It might even be something in the Aurora Tool Set itself. Again, I have to remember. I know I was able to figure it out at one point. But once you're able to do that, they won't walk through it. You know what I mean? So this way the placeable actually makes sense. And again, this process can be done for tile sets. It can be done for trees. It can be done for, if you want to make a new water texture, for instance, right? You could do the same thing. Now the older tile sets, obviously, it's one of those things where they say it doesn't work with older files. But if you were to reverse engineer a tile set and go in and extract the models and get the UV layouts for them and get the textures that were used for it, all you have to do again is to create a MTR file, go into the model files, model file or model files of the tile set, each one, You'll have to make sure that it's named properly, matching the textures as well as the, the base that's going to go with it, if it even has one, or a walk mesh. Usually tile sets deal with walk meshes. And do the same process. And once you have everything for the normal and specular ready, add it into a hack pack. Do the same thing. Make sure they're referencing an MTR file. Make sure the model is referencing that MTR file as well. And it should create that kind of look on your tile set. Now, I know they have tile sets out there already that have that. Now, you could ask those authors how they did it. They might be able to better teach you that. I haven't messed with it yet, but essentially the idea in theory is the same. So for placeables, at least you now know how that works. And at the same time, you'll know what the scaling is. So let me close this again, and let me just show you, in case I haven't already gone over it yet. Let me go back. The reason I want to do this is because I'm going to show you. All right, so that's the same size as the original I had, but I want to actually show you the units for this model. So the height will be 200. Now it says NWU, and I'll show you in a second what that means. So this will basically be 200 meters. Okay, I'm using meters. So one Neverwinter unit is 1 meter. So 200 meters for the height, 90 for length and width, and that's basically around it. Okay, so this will be for the human. Again, each character scale will be different, so you'll have to test that out. But for the human, at least you know what this is. And I use this basically as kind of an average for all the character models to then create assets around. So if I wanted to make like a ruined tower but have an opening, let's say that I don't have an actual orc, like this is going to actually be that. I was going to work on this and actually make it the orc player scale. But let's say that this is the human one, and I wasn't sure what the orc scale was, but I know it's just a little bit bigger and a little bit wider than the human. Essentially just make it probably outside of this a little bit, give yourself a little headroom, make it a little taller, you know what I mean? So this way that character can walk through the archways or doorways that you have created. But again, it's probably always better to make sure that you make a reference scale first and then model around that. And this will make sure that it covers the collision box as well. So you know that when you're going around this, that collision box of your character is going to be able to make him walk through the doorway or archway or whatever you're trying to make. So that's basically how you do that. You're just going to make sure you do the process right. Like I said, make the model, make sure it's scaled right, click on it, go here, or actually first what you should do is go here, reset Xform, right? Reset selected, right? Then select off. Then you want to go back, go here, make sure it's down on Neverwinter Nights. Click on this if you don't already have a base. And again, you want to make sure this is centered first. That's probably the best practice. Click on the ground after you've done this. Click here. That menu will pop up like I showed you before. Put it into other as the category because you'll have character and all this other stuff. Once you have that in there, make sure it's centered to the grid as well. Name it the same as your placeable. Okay. And then press OK. And then that should basically connect it to the placeable. Now that that's done, again, you can create the textures. You can render those out of here. If there was a way to do it with a normal map and specular, you can do it. Just make sure that it matches the layout of the diffuse unwrap from your UVs, meaning that once you've already done the unwrap of your UVs, add the texture and render that out with render to texture, because that's essentially going to give you that diffuse texture map that you need. Then make normal maps and speculars off of that. Then after you've done the two normal map and specular copies of the diffuse, then you want to add, like, say, ambient occlusion. Then you would create a ambient occlusion, obviously on just a white paint texture. Get the shadowing, take that as well as your diffuse texture, because they'll both be matching the same UV layout, bring it into Photoshop. And so basically, let me show you that real quick. Don't worry about this, but let's say we add another layer, right? I'll unlock this. The best way to create, say, this is the diffuse, but let's say we had another layer and we're doing ambient occlusion. So that would be all white except for the shadowing, say, at the bottom. The best way to get rid of that white but keep the shadowing is go to multiply. So if you had that here or above it, I think above it's probably the way you want to do it, This way, it's going to show this, and then it's going to show the shadowing the way it's supposed to be. Then you want to collapse them and save them into a diffuse targa file like this, okay? So you'd overwrite the original that you made. Just make sure you back up the original, put it somewhere else, then do the same thing, name it the same thing, same file type. This way, you'll have the ambient occlusion on it, but you'll also have the normal map and the specular done off of the original file without the ambient occlusion, if that all makes sense. And again, like I said, make your MTR file, edit your model file, make sure that that references the MTR file. And then once the MTR file is set up properly and you have the textures that you need with the model file, bring it into the hack pack editor, here, make sure that you import everything, okay? Save that hack pack, load it into the Aurora Tool Set, which I'll show you in a second here. That's one part that I meant to show you. Let me exit this. And then you want to create your placeable. Sorry, this is getting a little longer than I expected, but I want to make sure everybody understands, so you could always rewind and go forward if this is getting boring to you. So let me launch this real quick. So I just, made the default level that I'm going to show you in a second in the default CEP starter. I wouldn't advise this, but it's good to have to use CEP because pretty much everybody uses it. Another thing I'm going to show you in a second is the Placeables 2DA that you're going to have to edit to have this appear in the tool set in the first place. And what I would advise is, depending on what you're going to use as a, I'm not really sure what's going on here. Oh, I know, because this is still open. My bad. Let me close that. Yeah, it always does this every time. I don't know why. So basically, there's a placeables.2da file that you have to edit so it references the new custom content that you've made. So let me open this up real quick. The great thing about having PCIe and NVMe SSDs, they're very, very quick. Go to the Boglands. Basically just a, little level. So as you can see, my custom assets here, right? So I would go under, this is how to create it. And I'll say this is after you've already done the 2DA thing, because that's also something that you're going to have to include into that hack pack so it references it. But basically I would go here, go under miscellaneous. Now again, the reason I use the CEP starter levels because it's already got everything loaded in. And then all I have to do is add it here. But then I would take the placeables.2da from the CEP and use that as the reference in the file that I'm going to edit, so that you're not using like the original one without the CEP, because then it's not going to list all of the extra things you get with the CEP expansion. Okay. So you want to make sure that you use only the Placeables 2DA of, say, whatever expansion or added custom content that you're going to be using. So let's say you're using Project Q. You want to make sure you get that Placeable 2DA. Look for, either it says CEP reserved or Q project reserved or user reserved, whatever it may say. Pick one of those lines and I'll show you what to do next, but just keep that in mind. So I have this already made, obviously player scale, right? So let's say I haven't made this yet and I want to create another one. So I'm going to make a copy just for the sake of it. But usually you'd make new. You'd select, the top of this over here to let me do this quick. This is how you'd go about it. You'd go to new, okay? And so what's going to pop up is it's going to have a menu here. You want to go to miscellaneous, right? And you'd probably call it, I'll just, do player scale 2. How about that? We'll just do it this way. So there's that. You want to click on launch properties. And then it's going to open the properties dialog. So this is going to be the default of what it's showing, okay? But what I want to do is go down to where this will actually be relevant. There's a lot of stuff here, so. All right, so because I've already set this up with the 2DA placeables file, it's going to show my model. And because I have that already installed in Hack Pack, it's going to show all the, the textures and everything. So let's get real close here. And you're going to see it's even in this, it's going to show you that it's reacting to the textures, right? Okay, so let's just do that. So now we created it, see? And now we can put it into the tool set to work with. So what I'm going to show you in a second here is the Placeables 2DA. So this is the one that I have in the hack pack. And the best way to kind of find a space that's open, see how it says user? I did CEP reserved because I'm using CEP reserved, but this would probably be what pops up if you're not using CEP or Project Q, right? So you'd probably pick one of these. So to be safe, since I'm using CEP, I'm going to use one of these. And I did it all the way down here right before these. So I have a bunch of stuff that I'm making for a Draken inspired modular or module world, or player world, I should call it, because they're usually called modules. It is based after an old NES game. That game actually was based after Dungeons and Dragons, believe it or not. It was one of the games I liked when I was a kid, so I figured why not make in a Dungeons and Dragons game like Neverwinter Nights, make a remake for it. So in the future, I will do a little bit more on this project, but for now, for the sake of it, you'll see this, okay? So you'll see these numbers, and you'll see these little lines, right? Now these here you don't really have to worry about. I'll go up all the way to the top real quick to show you what categories these are. The only things you got to worry about here, and don't worry about these are just pushed over. If I really wanted to kind of line them up, I could. But right here where it says CEP reserved, you want to make sure that you put the name of your model right here. So let's say that we're talking about the player scale, right? So I've already brought it in. This would be the name of the model, as well as the AuroraBase and the textures, all that kind of match. But over here, this is going to be the name that pops up in the Aurora Tool Set when you're looking for the visual of your 3D model. So you will see player scale, and that's how I was able to pick it in the settings there for the new asset, and this will pop up. So this is why you got to set this up. Okay, so this is 12,001. Put this in, boom, done. Same thing with these other ones. So if I wanted to make placeables of these, now that I have this all set up, it's going to pop up into the tool set. Without having this set up properly, you will not be able to use your new custom model or the textures. Okay, just want to keep this in mind, that you can copy the 2DA file from, say, either a hack pack of CEP, or if it's separate, as long as it goes to that version of CEP or Project Q, or whatever you're using, it will reference it within that. So you want to make a copy of the original, and then you have to still call it Placeables. It's got to match the original name, but back up the original file without any of this extra content that you've made, okay? And then just replace that with the one that you're doing here, if that makes sense. So once you do that, this is what's going to be allowing you to have this pop up in the tool set, okay? Once you do that, then you can place it around. But again, like I said, I did this once before, and I forgot exactly what I had to do to create a collision hull, like sort of a a box around your placeable, so that you don't walk through it. Now I know that there's a way to do it. It might actually be something you can do here in the tool set, because it says static, right? Now I know even with static, I was able to make it so you can't walk through it. Now it may actually change if you make it plot and usable, and you may not be able to walk through it. But then again, I know that there's some way to actually make it so that within the tool set, it will actually use like a default collision box, but I forgot how to do that. But anyway, you get the idea. Once you figure that out, and once I figure that out, again, I'll make a video showing you the extra parts in Neverwinter Max Plus, how to save to where you want to export it, as well as the other things I couldn't find directly in this tutorial. Probably should have had that in check before I made this, but again, live and learn. So that's basically the process. That's how you create your custom content. You scale it properly. You set up the units properly so that you know what the scale is going to be, how to texture it, how to export the model, how to set up the new materials so they pop up in the engine with the MTR file, and edit your .mdl file, your model file, as well as editing the Placeables 2DA, because since these are placeables. And then now what I think I already showed you the hack pack file. So this way you can add it to the hack pack in a list. All the files are there. Save it, load it into Aurora Tool Set. So for those of you that are not sure how to do that, what you would be doing essentially is going under Edit, Module Properties, Custom Content. Now I have this at the top. It doesn't overwrite anything here, so that's safe for me to do. But you wouldn't normally do this unless, like for instance, if you had something in here that's going to overwrite any of the stuff down here, only bring it to the top if that's what you want to do. If not, you want to put that below so that the stuff above it's going to overwrite what's in this. If for any reason you have to do it that way. But since I'm making all my own custom stuff, that's going to be at the top. You could probably even put this underneath the top here because this is actually supposed to be on the top. But you could probably put it underneath there to be safe. Or you could put it down here since it's not really going to matter where you put it. This is just going to load everything in a certain order, okay? And again, these are just all the extra hack packs that I've added to my module. Normally you would just have it set up like this, but there is more stuff that you can actually add from CEP, as well as, you know, any other assets that you want to create or anything that somebody else has created you want to bring into your module. And then the talk file, you want to make sure it's this one because this is the most recent. Now there's mods out there, or at least I should say, you know, plugins and add-ons for this game that you might be using other talk files with this CP stuff. But from what I've noticed is that if you don't use this with these, it doesn't really work well. So you might want to keep that. But sometimes people will make a talk file that has all this plus their extra stuff in it. You'll have to read it on their website, description of the file, stuff like that. So that's basically it, guys. Hopefully this tutorial was helpful. Sorry it was so long. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comment section. Again, I don't really have any other way for people to get a hold of me right now except like email or on my YouTube channel. I don't really feel safe handing out a lot of my contact information. I don't really use Discord. It's just something I don't use because it's annoying to have in the corner and it making a bunch of noises, and I'm not really using it for everything. So again, this would probably be the best way to get a hold of me is on YouTube, and any emails that I provide. I may just, you know, talk back and forth with you and then contact you any way you want me to contact you, then give you that information. But again, I don't give out my personal stuff for obvious reasons. But again, if you have questions, please ask me in the comment section. And once I'm able to figure out the other parts of this tutorial that I couldn't do in this tutorial, I will make a supplement video, or I will just remake this tutorial altogether and update it so that everything is included. So all right, guys, hopefully that was helpful, and I'll talk to you guys later.